Hi, I'm Ted Price with Insomniac Games, here with the AIAS Game Maker's Notebook. And today it is my pleasure to be with one of my best friends in the industry, Todd Howard. Todd and I talk a lot about the production challenges that we face in this industry, especially when it comes to games as large and as fabled as Skyrim and Fallout. And I think it's absolutely worth hearing what Todd has to say about some of the history behind the franchises, some of the big decisions they made along the way, and how he and the team makes decisions every day about some of the challenges we all run into when we're dealing with very complex productions. At the same time, Todd shares some of his personal life and how games fit into his relationship with his family, and talks a little bit about humor and the importance of humor in games and one's life. So here we go with the podcast, and I hope you enjoy hanging out with Todd as much as I did.
Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook, a podcast featuring a series of in-depth one-on-one conversations between game makers, providing a thoughtful, intimate perspective on the business and craft of interactive entertainment. The Game Maker's Notebook is presented by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member-driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment.
Todd, thank you for being here. It is awesome to hang out. I love hanging out with you. We get a chance to hang out at most of the industry events, but I don't think we ever really get a chance to talk much about production and just some of the fun challenges we face in this industry.
Yeah, and it's always great to see you. When you emailed about this, like, hey, let's do this, I was like, fantastic, to see you, because I always like to. And it's good that our conversations also, we have similar studio, backgrounds as well. And so the challenges that we have making games and sharing notes and how you solve things and how we've solved things, it's always great, and it's cool to do it in this fashion.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of challenges, we were just talking about the relative sizes of our studios, and both of our studios have grown a lot to take on the massive games that are in some ways kind of required by gamers. But you, more than anybody, the games that you made with Fallout and with Skyrim are giant. And one of the things that I've wondered about for a long time is, how do you think about managing a project that size at the very beginning, when you're coming up with the idea and you're thinking this is going to be an adventure that surprises players and gives them even more than they think they want? How do you organize your thoughts at the very start?
At the very start, it's mostly about tone. What is the world that not that you just want to play in, but that makes you curious or makes you think, who would I be? What would I do? How is it unique? It's got to scratch a certain itch. And Elder Scrolls for a long time, and in one respect, very generic. But the thought of that, big fantasy world, we've tried. I think people have drifted toward that in terms of wanting to play something like, be in a big fantasy world. And really, since, starting with Morrowind, it was, okay, that's not enough. Like, what is the tone? What is the deeper kind of flavor of it? And Morrowind's is, stranger in a strange land. Like, this is more alien than I'm used to in fantasy, and I'm the outsider. And we tend to shift back and forth. So Oblivion is, well, it's got to feel a little bit more friendly, isn't maybe not the right word, but that it makes you feel more comfortable at the get-go. And then the themes and the other things are a bit more not always about you.
Okay.
And Skyrim's is more of this epic reality in terms of structures and cultures that feel man-made, but are larger than life, and you walking as this prophesized person through that. Fallout is one where you want to have the the naivete of what everyone thought the nuclear future would bring, and something that's harsh but has the ability to wink at the camera and have some fun with itself, so it's not just completely depressing all the time. And that one, it has a good groove where you know it when you see it. But that's what long answer. That's what we start with in terms of, hey, what's the tone? And then once everybody on the team feels that, they can run.
Right.
We have a lot of really experienced people who have worked together for 20 plus years. And that really is how we do it at our scale. Once everybody's, on board with the tone and gets it, they create a lot of content very, very quickly.
So what are the conversations like when you are working with the team to establish that tone? Do you have a lot of arguments or disagreements?
I think everybody about anything really, but it's, we say trying to figure out what to spotlight. So we'll do a number of things during the project and then play it and look at it together. And that definitely is an agreement on, hey, this stuff feels like the spotlight ones when it comes to a sheer amount of content. And our games are so big that if somebody has an idea they like, even if we're not going to spotlight it, it has a place in the game. That's, we tend to find a home for everything. With the Elder Scrolls a little more, there are things that we'll cut out because this doesn't fit. Fallout is just awesome. It is the greatest franchise to work on because whatever batshit crazy idea you have, there's usually a way to put it in a Fallout game.
You can certainly justify it in terms of maybe it was caused by radioactivity, or it was some remnant of the previous humanity's efforts.
Right. You can go very serious with a emotional, story beat on a quest, and then the next minute you can do B-movie Lizardmen.
Yeah.
And they can work together. So
but do you have a yardstick though to keep things consistent? I mean, do you establish certain pillars, and when you're evaluating ideas, if one is sort of on the fringes of what you think might be acceptable, you use those pillars and say, okay, guys, this kind of doesn't fit. This machine guns that you want to put in Skyrim, not quite there.
Absolutely. So we will usually have a series of tone things, concept art and vibes with stuff or themes that we want to be hitting home. And then we tend to break off strike teams on feature sets.
Okay.
And Fallout 4, a good one, was the building system, which was something we wanted to try for a while. And it was, the team very split on that. Should we be spending our time on the system, Minecraft-y build things? And it actually first started partly as can we find a way modding was always very, very popular for us.
Right.
But in terms of the way people talked about our games, but not what they did. I think at the time it was 6 or 7% of our audience did mods. So you're looking at 93% of the audience doesn't interact with them. And so it was, with Fallout, we're going to rebuild the world. Oh, we can let people share this. So if we let them, quote unquote, mod in the game, then we can find a way they can share that. We didn't end up doing that part where they could share it, but the building systems and, hey, let's make this your own became you could view it as, when you're developing it, as a distraction to the main thing you want to make. And then, how much emphasis do we put on this? Do we make it a requirement? Do we not make a requirement? How do we feel about it? And I think a lot of our audience is still torn on it, that as a system. There's people who don't want to do it and find it a distraction. And there's people who do it almost solely. All they do is build things and share it. So I think it was a huge positive, but that was one that we struggled with. Do we keep investing time into this feature? How
long did it take you to make that call? Is it months, years?
And the other one with that is they go throughout the project. That's real, if you, I think most developers who've worked on games that take 3 to 5 years that our stuff takes, you're doing it throughout.
Yeah.
When do you punt on something and say, hey, I know that there's a lot of sunk costs in this feature, but the opportunity costs are greater if we on the things we're not doing. And for the building system in Fallout 4, that was one that went for a while. And then once you're getting near the end, it's, hey, this is great.
Was there a magic moment? Was there that sort of that light bulb moment where all of a sudden something worked and it was fun and you could see how it was going to make it to the end?
The artist, Ryan Sears, who did a lot of the building system for it, had made a lot of times you're just trying to get something to work. Mm-hmm. So when you're in development, let's just get this to work, and then you feel really good because it works, but that doesn't mean it's good. And too many things end up that way in shipping games in terms of, well, that worked and we moved on. But Ryan had built this little camp or place he built, and he started doing all the neon lights and the little pixel blocks, where the thing he made was not something that we thought you could make. Before that, dealing with shacks and crops, and it worked, but it wasn't creative. It wasn't expressive in a way of like, look what I did.
Yeah.
And then the other one day he says, look what I did. And he has the light up Vault Boy, which we then eventually featured when we first announced it. Like, that's the, kind of magical, hey, you can make this your own in the same way you can make your character your own or make your quests your own or things like that. So, yeah.
You think it's important for most features to have those moments where the team can gather around and look at it and say, yes, I see that's where it's going, or
100%.
Yeah.
And I think every big feature in a game goes through that, where people are working on it, and until it can show itself to everybody else in a way they can appreciate and buy in and fuel that development cycle, it's a marathon. So you need those moments of, there it is, and the people who did it, they have a ton of pride and like, hey, everyone likes it, and that's fuel for the rest of the team in terms of, hey, this is going to be great. These things are going to click together. I guess that's the pattern we go through. We have a bunch of ideas. Each of the individual ones kind of has that moment where they are expressing themselves in the right way to us. And then the last can be anywhere from 6 months to a year at the end is where we tie it all together. So usually a year out, we have things that like, this is good, and this is good, this is good. But when you play the game, it's a bit schizophrenic and it doesn't gel together. And I think that is probably one of the things I'm most proud of with the team at Bethesda Game Studios is I think we're uniquely good at that part where it doesn't feel like a big mess. And that takes everybody on the team because, again, they've all worked together for so long in connecting all of the dots and one system leading into another.
So it must take a lot of faith on your part and the team's part to know that all of these disparate systems that have been built up until the last year are actually going to fit together like a perfect jigsaw puzzle.
It does. And we've had the benefit of knowing that we've done it before. But we've grown a lot recently. So a lot of the new people, they're always asking, how does this compare to where you were last time at this part of the project? And there's a great line, in Shakespeare in Love, Geoffrey Rush says, I don't know, it always works out, I don't know how. So I end up saying that a lot. Like, how does it compare? Usually it's at this state of messed up, and we always fix it somehow. But the people who've done it, they're kind of, we'll get it done. We know how this works.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think that sometimes that's missing in general in the industry, especially as the stakes continue to increase in terms of the money spent and the opportunity costs for diving into a giant scale game. And it's difficult to have faith that things are going to work out and so have you over the years as you've been leading teams found that you trust people more? Do you delegate more, or are you?
I do, yeah.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I kind of have to. We have so many things going on, and each of the games takes so much out of you. I've tried, I'd say each game, again, because the people have done it, I can let my hands off more and more things in terms of the real minutia.
Yeah.
I used to program the weather systems or do every bit of the character system or building do everything. I did the sound effects on Daggerfall. Maybe did everything. But a lot of people, I think, I'll say our age coming up.
That's what we did.
You did everything. Yeah. That's I think one of the benefits that you can kind of understand every part of the game because you did it. And now I can think a little bit more strategically in terms of what we should be doing in the future, and do we have the right things on the team that we need, as well as checking that tone. How is the glue coming together? And then once in a while, I will jump in now and design a system. But it's much better for the people who own a system to really dig in on it, and then they'll meet with me during the week and present it. And I ask a lot of questions, and I help them solve problems. But they're the ones doing the hard work.
Well, that has to be the case, right?
Yeah,
if you have a giant team. So are there things that you are, say, irrationally passionate about? And I'll give you an example. For me, I'm usually irrationally passionate about.
Is that a phrase you use a lot around the office?
No, I like it though. Those two words sound good together. Animation transitions. It drives me bananas if I see that a transition between two animations is not working or is jerky, and I'm sort of known for driving people crazy at Insomniac for pointing things like that out, but I try not to do it as much. But I have those irrational moments, and are there some like that for you in your games?
Oh man, I have a huge list. I'm trying to think of the ones that people will point out back to me when I do it. I am OCD about fonts and interface spacing to the point of, if you pull something up and one line is a pixel off, I notice and I have to mention it. Like, that's really nice, except that bar over there is literally one pixel off. Like, how's that? Okay, and they check, like, yeah, you're right. The other one's more of a pet peeve. And I get our designers on, and a lot of people do this in games, more of a pet peeve, where someone will give you a quest, but before they do, or right when they do, they then tell you all the reasons they can't do it.
Huh.
So I need you to fetch my dog. And most designers can't leave that alone. They have to explain why this person cannot fetch their dog. And like, well, now you're down the rabbit hole. Now I'm going to have that. Your reason doesn't make sense. Or this, like, don't even try to explain why the person can't throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom. Just give them the quest.
That is really funny, because that's exactexactly the thing I would do. I would want to explain it.
They always do. They like, I want
that's what I
to
do in
make
real
sense.
life. Yeah.
Like, just don't explain it. Because you can't win that conversation.
Yeah. Well, speaking of explaining things, one aspect of the Elder Scrolls series has always impressed me is the sheer amount of literature you have in the game, in the books. And how did you generate all of it? And how do you make sure it's consistent and relevant to the player?
Good question. So this goes back to Daggerfall. And so 1995, we were making the game. Wow, that was a long time ago now. Just adding up, 23 years. Wow. And we had some CompuServe forum moderators. That's people went to CompuServe. Everyone's gonna start looking that up now. Who isn't have been around very long. And believe it or not, the gods in Elder Scrolls, those were the handles of the CompuServe forum. So they became the gods.
That's great.
And we wanted to have a lot of literature, and Ted Peterson, who was the lead designer at the time, was writing a lot of it. And he reached out to them. So a lot of them wrote those books initially.
Wow.
They were all into fantasy and things like that. And they were edited. So we got this library in Daggerfall, but a lot of it created by our fans, more or less. And then every game we add to it. And Morrowind, we added a lot. So Morrowind was a big push to make the Elder Scrolls more unique in its flavor and build out the world of Tamriel. Redguard was the first Elder Scrolls game I led before Morrowind. And we started making the push there. And we added more and more lore. But the rule when we started then was it is always in the voice of the world. And it can always be refuted. So it is intentionally doesn't always fit together, just like our own history.
Yeah.
So the way they talk about gods, or the way they talk about what are the heavens, what is the moon, what happened in the past, and we intentionally like different accounts of things. So what happened to the dwarves is a big thing in the Elder Scrolls, and I know exactly what happened, but I don't know. I have my opinion, and I tell people this is around the office. This is exactly what happened. Do not think differently, but write it differently. Make sure that it makes it more authentic.
Yeah.
And our fans, like the really hardcore Elder Scrolls fans, go into this stuff, and when people I don't even know what they're talking about, because there's layers of stuff written by people that even I don't comprehend in terms of cosmology and other things. And then again, every game adds to it. So Elder Scrolls Online came, which was done by our sister studio, ZeniMax Online, led by Matt Fire, and they've done an awesome job on Elder Scrolls Online, not just when it came out, but building that game and adding to the lore and what happened before. And it's one of those things where you can't plan for all of that. You need 20 plus years of history on a franchise that you've nurtured to kind of get to that point.
That's impressive. I mean, it really is. And so the fact that I'm imagining you've read most of it, and if not all of it, and being able to...
At one point or time, but I can't recall it. But when we're playtesting, I won't read them as a matter of course to let me read every line of dialogue and the books. But when I'm playtesting, if I find one I haven't read, I read it.
Yeah.
And they have this. We do this thing. We did a thing that was very taxing on the system for Skyrim in particular. And I'm going to forget. People will correct me. We tried to do it in Oblivion, and it was too expensive, which is I wanted the books hinged so that when they flopped around, they felt more real, so that the physics worked on the hinge. And it's expensive to run. So we want to build a library, and I don't know what. And the artists would come and complain. Well, we know this is slow, so we can only put X many books on the table or in the library. It doesn't look real, so we need a bookshelf, like every other game, where we are going to make the spines of the books, but they're not real books. And I was absolutely not. Or why can you pick up all this stuff? Why can you pick up the forks in this? And it takes a lot of physics time, and we got to make it all, and no one really cares. And they care. They don't know they care.
I will tell you that
it makes it real.
That's one of the things I remember the most. I mean, going into the dungeons and kicking around bowls or picking up the forks, or that happened to be down there for some strange reason, or whatever it is. It definitely adds that layer of believability and something special to it as well. Something special. And you mentioned tone before, but there are all those little touches that add up after a while, from the names like the Dwemer and the Daedra to the bone meal, which I feel like I am now intimately familiar with bone meal, even though I've never seen it in my life. I feel like I see it a lot in your games.
Sure.
But it does create this really unique flavor for the series that sets it apart for me from all other sort of D&D inspired stories or games.
Yeah, we find with those things that you eventually can figure out something gamey, quote unquote, to do with those systems, but they have this, they ground you. So when you kind of build to a dragon landing, you buy it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not gamey.
You've already been immersed in the world.
Right.
And you get
the fork
it.
is real.
Yeah.
But there's always one piece of clutter that we make, and then for some reason, usually coincidentally, the level builders, world builders like it, and so they put it everywhere. And then, so I think it was pillows and more, and then it was cheese. And it starts as an accident, and then it becomes a joke.
Okay.
And then you'll see videos of people filling their rooms full of cheese or whatever, and it's great.
Yeah, that's cool. Those little touches.
Yeah,
I mean, it's nice. It's sort of fan service in a way, right?
Yeah.
It becomes fan service, even though
they're in on it. They're in on it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things because that we're really fortunate is that I think we're pretty in sync with our fans in terms of what we're doing, what they want to see, and the things that give us joy when we're playing the games. And that definitely feels, and because there's so many modders for so long, it definitely feels like we're doing a lot of it together. Even though we can't show the stuff we're working on now, we're still reacting to things they're doing because so many people still, it's staggering how many people still play the games.
Well, they're sort of endless. I mean, that's the way they feel. Like you
Yeah.
can never discover everything. You can never explore every square inch, or maybe some people clearly have, but that's the way I feel when I go into one of the games. But I want to come back to one very, very small part of your games that I wanted to ask you about for years, and it's going to sound mundane, but for me, it's synonymous with the hours and hours and hours I played in Skyrim or Oblivion, and that's lockpicking. And lockpicking for me is sort of a thing that you expect from RPGs and any sort of adventure game, but the way you guys did it and the way you made that into a mini game that doesn't have any overt rules, but you sort of innately get them as you are breaking lockpick after lockpick was fascinating to me from a design perspective. And again, maybe I'm the only person who feels this way, but I would love to know how you guys decided to make that sort of a thing, and how you tune it, how you do take that and make it an actual fun part of the gameplay experience, while being, maybe I'll admit, a little frustrating at times.
That's a good question. You get into the mini game category, and then there's always a debate over how many you have, whether it's important, do you spend your time on it? And so with Oblivion, we did a number. That was, so the lockpicking in Oblivion is very unique. A lot of people like that. We weren't totally crazy about it because it didn't feel like we were lockpicking, but it works as a mini game.
Yeah.
And then that one really frustrated a lot of people, but there's a lot of people who liked it a lot. We did this speech persuasion mini game in Oblivion. And I had tasked some designers with, this is kind of the nugget of how a minigame could work, reading people's facial expressions. And that game works as a minigame, but it is the fakest, it has nothing to do with persuading people. It is when I see it now, I cringe. It is the goofiest, and I'll take the blame for it because I did say something like this. And we did a number of persuasion things there on Oblivion, but when you see it now, it is embarrassingly bad. It's just goofy. And so with Fallout 3 is when we did the lockpicking most people know us for. And then we had a couple designs. And Emil Pagliarulo, who's the lead designer, and I went through a number of things, and we wanted something that felt like you were really lockpicking and not frustrating in the way the Oblivion one was. And we really like that one, to the point where we use it now. We used it in Skyrim, we used it in Fallout 4, and sometimes that feels lazy, like we're using the same lockpicking minigame, shouldn't we have a new one? Which we had many new designs, and it was, this is ours, it feels really good.
Yeah.
I really like the hacking minigame in Fallout, and so we repeated that again, where again, some of the people, even on the team, feel, no, this feels the same, but like that is a really good, another minigame that I think is uniquely ours, that I like a lot. So yeah.
Do you bring, I mean, those are overt systems that where you can actually see them from between franchises. You can see them moving between franchises. But do you have a lot of core systems as well that you use for the world building in both games, both series?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the things where we've never had multiple teams. Back Bethesda long ago we did, and it didn't go well. You got very different cultures on different teams, and this was after Daggerfall. We made a bunch of games, and the main team got split up, and I was doing Redguard, and we had Battlespire. We did a 10th Planet game that we canceled, which was a sci-fi thing. We did Morrowind, started and stopped several times, and then we went. The company was not in good straits. It really hurt the company. We were probably going to burn ourselves down.
You mean this is during Morrowind? Or
this
were you trying to
was
do both of the
after
teams at the same time?
Daggerfall, right before the Morrowind people know as Morrowind.
So, but the trying to run 2 teams at once was...
We probably had 3 or 4, but they were very separate.
Okay.
I was in charge of one. There were people in charge of other ones.
Yeah.
And the company was, we were about to go out of business. And we rallied around Morrowind. Like, we need to be one team, but we'd also gotten very small. And then eventually the larger company became ZeniMax Media, where we had capital and could invest in it. But ever since then, I took this lesson of, we may do multiple things, but we will not be multiple teams per se.
Wow.
And so I forget your original question, but the editor we use and the tools and the core systems go between them so that people can move where they feel, if you're a level designer, like, yes, I work on all of this stuff. I'm not on the Elder Scrolls team or the Fallout team. I'm part of Bethesda Game Studios, and I will work on this, and this. Mobile's a little bit separate, but we still pull people into it. We'll pull an artist off of Fallout 4 to work on Fallout Shelter, or the designer. And so you have people who focus more, but they all expect they can touch anything at any time. And for the big stuff we're doing outside of mobile, the editor is the same. It grows. The animation systems change and grow from game to game, but that built up knowledge base is what lets us be efficient, iterate fast, move between things, speak the same language without huge amount of management oversight. So I think it's essential to how we do things.
Do there emerge points of divergence where, say, you've got a team who really wants to do something with AI that doesn't necessarily fit in the other franchise?
Well, we're never doing them completely in parallel.
Yeah.
So there's always one project that's in pre-production, maybe for years, and another one we have in full production, where the bulk of the team is on it, and then some people might be focusing on pre-production on something else. And those are different skill sets, whether it's concept artists or this or certain types of programmer. And so usually what's happening, take an animation system change that we're doing right now. We're finishing for one of our projects, though that's a project that's in pre-production, getting a new animation system, whereas the one that's in full production is using the old one. But those people look, and what happens though is that fuels them. The animators in production are commenting on the animation system in pre-production, and they're getting excited for, hey, I'm going to get to use that when I roll onto when that project rolls onto production.
So how do you keep everybody aware of what's happening across both projects and within a giant team?
We struggle with that. So I think communication, as you've grown, we have the main group in Rockville, we have the studio in Montreal, we work with other parts of ZeniMax. Escalation was a studio, and there's other people throughout the larger Bethesda that are working on our game. So it's over 300 full-time now, which is unique for us. And so we have struggled somewhat with communicating that across not just departments, but in the case of Canada, countries.
Yeah.
And so we have always done a monthly team meeting, and now we do that, and it gets broadcast to the other locations. And we spend a good hour and a half, 2 hours a month showing stuff and making sure everybody knows this is exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
And it's a great meeting where everybody gets to see what's going on, or at least the high points, and talk about it. And that's something that has been very, very helpful for us. But we still struggle with that.
Sure.
Or a decision that comes down can seem, whereas it used to, most people were in the room, or they'd hear it in the office when you're 30 people. When it's 10 times that, communicating something that was a very thoughtful decision to a one sentence, we're doing this now, can just come across very poorly.
Yeah.
I've learned that the hard way.
I can totally get that. Do you guys do company-wide playtests of? We
do. We do them within the team first for a long time. So until we like it, I like to avoid going outside the team. Well, then we'll go to the rest of the company.
Okay.
Within Bethesda now, overall, with publishing and the other studios, id and Machine Games and ZOS and everybody, we're just about 1,700 people.
Wow.
So it's very big.
Yeah.
So we're kind of much smaller within the grand scheme of that. And once we like it, we'll go outside, because we may work on something and say, we're making it better and better. Oh, now it's good. And then you show it to somebody and they'll say like, I don't get it. This is bad.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you should have seen it before, but you can't tell. Kind of like, the boiling the frog, we call it.
Yeah.
That you can't tell that it's still not there because you feel so good because you saw the completely crap version. But that's a good resource for us because we do have a lot of awesome game makers and the other studio heads. We try to talk often and look at each other's stuff, and that's a treat for, I get to see what the id guys are up to and the Arcane guys and Machine Games and the new stuff that they're planning for Elder Scrolls Online. That's, it's a treat for, like, we have our own little mini E3 within Bethesda where every December we all come and everyone shows their games to the whole company.
Now, in those show and tells, are people honest with each other? Meaning brutally honest, where they might say, Todd, this feature, it's just not cutting it.
Respectfully, yes, we're very used to that. Within the team, 100, and we are our worst critics. There is nothing. People will give you criticism, and I'm sure they do on your games. And they almost apologize. Like, I'm sorry to say this, and I always tell everybody, I have not read stuff external that is anywhere close to the ripping we give ourselves.
Right.
And so on the team, we're harsh is the wrong word. We're very honest.
Yeah.
And you just have to call it out. Like, whenever we do something, I always remind people, there's going to be parts here that work really well, and you have to know there's going to be parts that don't. And we need to figure out the parts that are really working well, how we elevate those in the game, and the parts that aren't, either we're fixing them or we're cutting them or we're putting them in the corner, not in the spotlight. So there's features we have where we gotta put baby in the corner. We put it like horses are never great in our games, right. And we know it. And there's certain things we don't do with horses because we don't want to make them more important. Because now they're moving toward that spotlight and now they suck more. Not that they suck. They're just not that good compared to some other games that do horses really well.
What are some things that you don't do with horses? Just so as a player I can look at
Now it's how they control. We added combat on them later, but how they move. They can't move that fast because of the streaming system. So if we make them really, really run, then the game's not going to be able to stream in that town and you'll be running and there'll be nothing there. It will suddenly appear when the hard drive catches up. Things like that.
Well, I love the phrase, put it in the corner. I mean, that's really cool because not everything can have a spotlight on it. That's when you get into the kitchen sink problem, right? Where you're trying to focus on everything at once. And I also would agree that most players don't hold things in as high esteem as we do as game developers sometimes, right? I make this mistake all the time where I'll focus on, say, foot sliding. And nobody cares about foot sliding in games.
I have a great chart I use to remind people late in the process when people are getting, heads down, they've been crunching or working for so long. And it's a list of, here are the things that we spend most of our time on or talk about. Foot sliding, graphic polish, floating rock, and how's the balance of this, and da-da-da-da-da. And here's the main thing that our players are concerned about when the game ships. And the number one is my save game broken?
That is because that's a life-crushing event if it is broken.
That's catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
That guy's foot slides. So I have a separate list of, hey, remind yourselves, these are the ones that matter.
That's great. That is excellent advice.
And so it's a top 10 list, and the one on the right is totally different than the stuff that we talk about every day in the studio. No one's walking around going, save game still work? Have we banged on it? Is it really good? Example, when you're making a game, you're really, really focused on crashes near the end.
Yeah.
Is the game crashing? Is the game crashing? Is the game crashing? And so that one's high in the list, but most people expect it to be number one, crashing. But it's not. You'd rather the game crash than your save game get corrupted.
Yep.
So things like that. Or you'd rather the guy's foot slid, but the way he felt on the stick was so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You should write a book on that. I mean, that would be.
I have a lot of slides.
Well, it'd be great.
I've shown to them publicly, but people joke I have this kind of running this monthly team meeting, I have a library of, and I'll go back. So every project, I go to that point of the project, like, here's that slide from 2008. I'll put the date on it for the team. Like, same thing.
That is cool. What a great way to show people that, our problems don't really change.
Or I have to remind myself. It's like you forget.
Yeah.
If you move, you haven't moved in a while. Moving is terrible. Packing and moving, or having a child, not terrible, but the pressures of it and those are you forget how hard it is to finish a game. Yeah.
Speaking of slides, because you mentioned it, one of my favorite, I'll call it Todd Howard moments, was when you pulled up the slide of a guy jumping over babies at DICE. It must have been 7 years ago.
Yeah, probably. No, I used that one. That's old. I used that at Fallout 3, so it would 2000. I've used it a few times.
Have you?
I think it was late 2009. I probably used it the first time, now that you mention it.
Well, what it reminded me of in particular was that you use humor quite a bit in your communications, and you do it in a way that is, I think, endearing and diffusing, and it definitely, as you pointed out before, comes through in a game like Fallout. And is that something that you consciously do with the team when you are, say, leading the team? Is humor an important part of the culture? Is it important to discuss it as a game mechanic or a game tone addition as well?
There's two answers there. The game part is easier and is not a reflection of my own personality. When it comes to Fallout, that was our designers and Emil, who heads up the writing and design there. There's a lot of thought in like what kind of humor works and what kind of humor doesn't work in Fallout. How do you not make it too dark? And so and you can use, and how violence works in with that, which sounds bad to say, but there's a certain way you can use violence in Fallout for a sudden shock, almost humor value sometimes. And you'll see that in other, movies. Is it Pulp Fiction where they're driving and he blows the guy's head off? That like it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious.
It's one of those things where you're laughing and you're kind of uncomfortably laughing.
Yes, uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a very good way of saying it. So the humor in Fallout, and there admittedly some parts where it lands flat in the game, but the ones that are good are really good. My personal one, I actually probably have to rein it in. My mind is usually, I don't know if it's a defense mechanism. I'm making a joke in my head about everything, and I actually have to check my swing on that. Like, don't say that out loud. That's inappropriate. And so I think the people who know me really well see it full bore. And what they usually say to me is, Todd, it's a good thing you do not have a Twitter account, because you would have committed career suicide several times over by writing what's on your mind.
Oh, wow. What an opportunity.
No, I stay away from all that stuff. I know better for myself.
It's hard. I mean, I will admit, as somebody who is terrible at answering tweets, I have a Twitter account. I occasionally tweet stuff, but it's really hard to keep up. And I imagine because there are so many Skyrim and Fallout fans out there, it would be really challenging.
Yeah, and I don't. I get enough. I'd say I get enough attention personally. And I'm involved with the people who run our BGS Twitter and Facebook accounts and all that. Really good folks internally, and so I comment on that. Like, here's some good things to talk about.
Okay.
But I'd rather the focus be on the studio and not me. I have my place when I need to get up and talk or say things, but on a day-to-day basis, other people are better at that.
Sure, that makes total sense. Well, let me jump to sort of more esoteric things versus production issues. And if you were not working on Fallout or Skyrim, what other themes would you be interested in besides, say, the D&D related themes and post-apocalyptic stuff?
We have, I don't want to say.
Well, I don't want you to reveal anything. I was just asking about you personally.
Personally.
What kind of books do you find yourself reading that are not in that vein? Or what kind of entertainment do you find yourself drawn to? And what kind of games do you like playing that are not what you make?
I still like worlds that aren't completely realistic, that they, whether that's science fiction, fantasy, or historical ones, I like more than, not that that's not real, but it's not modern day. I enjoy the modern day stuff in games. I think GTA is great and things like that, but I like to figure out what makes a world tick.
Okay.
And then how I would touch that. So we made a list when we were back doing the Elder Scrolls Longer, right before we got Fallout, and we're getting a lot of pressure. Not pressure, we wanted to. Like, we're going to do something else. Let's make the list of here are the things that we would like to do one day. And Fallout, post-apocalyptic was at the top of it. And you think of Fallout, by the time you think, okay, that's not something, it's not ours, we can't work on it. And good tidbit, because we're not going to do it, we have Fallout, is post-apocalyptic. And I made a logo for a series called Apocalypse Road. It had this beat phonetically like the Elder Scrolls, Apocalypse Road. I made a great logo, too, with this road sign just said Apocalypse, with the RD. And then we had someone knew the folks at Interplay and said, well, you really want that to be Fallout? Well, yeah, but, I think we might be able to get that. And would you want that? Absolutely, a million times. And then maybe it was a year later. Okay, we have the rights to Fallout. It's like one of those things where you're like, where else does that happen?
Wow.
You say, I really want to, this would be, our next dream thing.
Yeah.
But there's other things in that list, that's what I would say, where some of those we're investigating, that we'd like to try some new things, though we love the worlds of Elder Scrolls and Fallout as well. They're ones that we're not going to leave behind.
That's great news for fans.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you guys are so well known for bringing those worlds to life. It doesn't really matter what the theme is if you do it the same way you did it with Elder Scrolls and with Fallout. That's a win. We'll
see where it goes. We've tried before and then and backed off. So you got to find the time where you say, yeah, this feels good. Let's go all in. But I like, even with that thing, like what makes a world tick, I really like that series Black Mirror.
Yeah. Which I haven't seen yet. Everybody says that it doesn't matter what order you watch them in.
Yeah, actually it does. Do not start with the first episode.
Really?
Someone told me that. And of course they said to me, Todd, you'd like Black Mirror. Do not start with the very first episode. And once I say that, you're like, oh, I got to watch the first episode.
Exactly.
But I'm telling you, do not start with the first episode.
Do you ever go back to the first episode?
I would not watch it again personally, but not for different reasons.
Okay.
It's anyway. I won't say anything else about it. I love that series because it's every episode is different and it takes a different take on the world and technology. But there's this pattern of watching it where for the first, depending on the episode, 10 minutes to half hour, you don't understand the rules of the world, and you're figuring them out, and that's part of, I think, the enjoyment of the show. And I like that about entertainment or a book or a game. Inside Out. I mean, it's a Pixar movie, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's one of their best movies in it's so unique, and what are the rules of this world in this girl's brain? And I enjoy that, like, oh, that's really cool. That's really very creative. Or, what are the other rules? How does that work? I don't know. Personally, I get very interested in that.
Well, that's a really great game designer's conundrum right there, because you want to create mystery, right? But at the same time, you don't want to lose players and have them be frustrated because they don't understand enough of the rules to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about my own experiences in your games, you guys don't really present the rules. You do have enough, you give the players enough leeway that they won't truly screw themselves, and you get to explore pretty much, you figure it out quickly while exploring.
Yeah, we struggle with that. That's a good debate in terms of when do you hold their hand and give them a tutorial, and when do you say just go?
Yeah.
And I think most games struggle with how to teach the player things, because learning is not, you're uncomfortable for a while.
Right.
I don't want to play the tutorial. I don't feel like I'm playing the game yet. We were just listening to Neil from Naughty Dog talk about, and they did awesome, right? And Uncharted 4 and Last of Us, a phenomenal job of teaching you the systems in the beginning of the game. We've struggled with that. In Skyrim, we did certain things. In Fallout 4...
I think you were a little bit more hand-holding in Fallout 4. That's what I remember.
Well...
I mean, when you're in the vault, right, this is what I recall. As a player, my experience was I had a very limited environment to explore, and it was linear enough that I wasn't going to get completely lost and not know what to do.
True. So we teach you the interface, but we don't really teach you the systems you need to survive.
That's true. Once you're out in the world,
and that was intentional.
Yeah.
So there's this, and we get a lot of feedback. People get out of the vault and it's a little bit, I don't know what to do. And I hit this thing and now I can build. How does building work? Or I can craft these things. And then how does that? You don't teach that. And well, I really need to be able to do this when I'm fighting, and deeper dive on VATS. And most games would really like, okay, we're going to pattern that out. We're going to baby step you through it, not in a bad way. But one of the things was, well, that's for the player to conquer as well. You're uncomfortable when you step outside the vault. You don't step out and be like, I got this.
Yeah.
I know what's going on. I know what everything does and how I'm going to survive. That you don't. And it's also intentional that you don't see another human for a while. And that was a feedback note internally where, well, we're used to giving you quickly a little town where you can buy and sell things, and it was sort of intentional to push that off to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, so that then when you get used to it, you also have the moment the character is of, I think I got this. I feel good in the world. And then, okay, what's the next system? Oh, I'm going to go back to this. I think I've figured this thing I passed. I now know how it works.
That worked for me, and it worked more thematically and tone-wise for me, because I felt that it gave me that feeling that I was alone, first of all. Right. And then when I started running into more denizens of the environment, I was ready, but I'd had that experience of feeling like this is me against the apocalypse. Really, I'm surviving versus following a predestined path. I liked that as a player.
Good,
for sure. So I do have to ask this one, which is related. If you weren't building RPGs, is there a genre another genre that you would love to jump into?
No.
Really?
That's
cool. That's awesome.
100% not. And the other thing is, and I say this often, the best thing about role-playing is it doesn't define a type of action, where it's not a strategy defines what you're doing. And an action game is the interaction, doesn't define the interaction. You could have anything in a role-playing game. You could have a racing game start in a role-playing game. And role-playing is I don't use the term as much, because if you look at a lot of games now, systems that are classically role-playing, leveling up and XP and all this and open world, I just described a lot of games, which had been our wheelhouse for a while. So and I would say this, when it comes to video games, and there's games I love that I wouldn't want to make, but when it comes to video games, the things they do really, really well, better than movies or other things, are putting you in a place. They do geography really well. They do, I'm going to put you here, and now what are you going to do? There's nothing else that can do that. And so even though we make quote-unquote role-playing games, we're making worlds where you're doing that. You're in geography. You're in a place. And that's where you get some of the magic. So whether you want to call it a role-playing game or not, that I would always want to do something like that. And this is a weird one too, big things. People say, well, let's make a smaller game. We do some mobile stuff now, which I think are smaller games, but they're growing in what their scale, what they can do, and how many people play them. And I think we'll always have a mobile game in development, just like we do on the larger AAA console PC side, where we're overlapping stuff. We're doing that on mobile now. I really enjoy it, faster throw. But what was I going to say? The games I like I'm addicted to sports games, believe it or not.
Oh,
I
okay.
love football for real, college football. I still miss, plug while we're here, NCAA football. The EA, I know why they got rid of it, but any chance I see people there, I beg them, please bring back NCAA football. And it sounds funny, like you're kind of smiling right now.
I am.
Like
just
you're
because-
giggling, and maybe it's because I'm smiling. But and this is going to sound completely cheesy, but I miss that game a lot. It was part of my cycle every fall. And I just loved it. I got a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment of playing that game. And now when college football season starts, I don't have that. And I deeply miss it. It sounds cheesy.
Well, did you play along with the season? I
did my own season, but it was my way of attaching to, look, I can do this too. This feels real to me. When I beat USC with Notre Dame in that game, I'm pumped. And now I get to, sometimes they win in real life or lose. I can't, if they would lose, which was a long time where they lost to USC every year, I would boot the game up and right that wrong.
Oh, that's great.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I play a lot of Madden now, really into Ultimate Team. It's phenomenally well done. But that isn't a game I would want to make. And I appreciate how hard those guys work, and I know a few of them. And they have to put a game out every year,
Right.
and they're working just as hard as anybody else. But that wouldn't be for me as a creator to work on, but I play it a ton. I play a ton of Hearthstone, but not a game that I would personally want to make. But I have put more hours into that game than most games over the last, when did it come out? 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, I will admit I do too.
Yeah,
and even some of the recent stuff they put out got me. I took a break from it for a while.
me too.
And they put out the dungeon raids
Same
now.
thing happened.
Yeah,
And my wife looked at me and she went, "Oh no, you're not starting to play that again." I'm like, I'm just I'm investigating what they're doing.
Exactly. Do you play with your kids?
I do. I played some PUBG single player, and I liked it. Really, really good game. And then now I only play it co-op with my oldest on Xbox, and it is a completely different experience. And I'm yelling at him like I would as his father, like, get away from the window. Are you listening to me? No, they're going to come the other. Why are you get over there? And then he's like, Dad, how many times have you gotten a chicken dinner? And like, he's way better at the game. And he kind of does the eye roll like, no, you follow me. But I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. That is, to me, that's one of the reasons I play games, is because it actually helps me connect with my kids, whether it's Clash Royale or talking about Assassin's Creed with my oldest, who loves Origins, or playing Injustice with one of my middle kids, who was never a game player until we bought Injustice, and then she just got obsessed with it. Obsessed. Every time she's 14, and every time she has a friend over to the house, she insists that they play a game of Injustice.
Wow.
And this is a girl who her thing is dance and
goes to the fighting game. All right.
Goes to the fighting game. Yeah. So maybe she has a future in, I don't know, fighting.
What does she think of Spider-Man?
This
is my way of asking you about Spider-Man through your daughter. See what I did there? I have to call it out before you say something bad.
Clever. I don't know what she thinks about Spider-Man.
This is for everybody listening. They want to hear what she thinks.
We haven't exposed Spider-Man to a lot of people at this point, other than the trailers we've released.
Right.
I think she just thinks it's kind of cool that she can tell her friends that her dad's working on one of those movies or one of those games that's associated with movies, even though this game has nothing to do with the movie. Right. And that's about it. Yeah. So my kids don't play the games that we make at Insomniac. They tend to choose other games, which is fine with me because it gives me an excuse to play other games as well. And just like you say to your wife, babe, this is research. I have to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For my kids really didn't much either. I'd have them into the office to try the VR, and that kind of blew their minds.
I will admit my kids' minds were blown by VR too. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing where you say, like, I know you got to try this.
Yeah.
Until you do, it's really, you can't explain it to people. But my youngest had gotten a Switch, really got into Zelda. And he hadn't traditionally played those games, and he was too young to play Skyrim when it came out. And then when Skyrim came out on the Switch, I said, well, you've you've played a lot of Zelda. I think you might like Skyrim. And I want to do it as the father, like, please play this game and see if you like it. And the short story is he got obsessed with it.
Oh, that's great.
It was great for a while. And then he got like every dinner conversation. Dad, what's with the Thalmor? And do you believe in Talos? Is he a god in this? And what is this? And who are your favorite Daedra? And why do they want to do this? And what are your weapons? And where did Tiber Septim come from? And what era? And he knows it, and I forget a lot of it. And the other week, and it felt bad, I was like, I'm done talking about this. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I get this enough at work. Like, let's talk about something else. And he got really upset.
Oh, man.
Like, and then he went through all the cycles. So I got to re-experience it. Well, I got to experience it kind of firsthand every day. Played on the Switch, and then he went to the Xbox One version. And then he discovered mods. And so he follows all these YouTubers who talk about Skyrim mods, a lot of old videos, but some of them new. And then he's downloading all these mods and showing them to me and what all the creators have done in the game. And so seeing it again through that filter it was really special, actually. It was really great.
That's wow. Well, that's one of the reasons we make games, right? Is to influence people to that degree so they can become, I don't know, inspired perhaps by, and maybe your son, does your son talk to you about making the games, and does he want to do it?
Then he's like, okay, when is Elder Scrolls 6 coming? And I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that right now either. And then he's like, can I give you my ideas? You know, can I work on it? Or like, come on, tell me a few things. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm like, well, you might, so I'm not going to say anything. But it's great. And I think that, you know, I think a lot of kids want to get into video games, but you got to be, if you're a creator, I kind of want my own sons to find their own way as opposed to, yes, you should absolutely make games.
Well, do your son's friends, or just do people ask you, what do I do if I want to do what you do? I'm pointing at you.
All the time. Yeah, I'm sure you get it as well.
Yeah.
It's the number one question when you meet people. How do I get into games? Or how do I get to your position? And there are two answers to that. One, I think I was very fortunate. I was saying this when we both, as we came up in the industry, because it was smaller and the teams were smaller, you had to do everything.
Yeah.
Where you could write your own game from start to scratch, every part of it. And that, I think if you look across studios, a lot of the studio heads are kind of in our age bracket because of that background. And the way people get in or get ahead now is doing stuff on their own. There's so many avenues. It's make anything. That's how I started, right? Writing games on my Apple II when I don't know what I was, 12, 13, wrote my first game. Wrote a new one every month. Yeah. Or either got bored or it sucked or just, I think there's so many avenues for people to do that now. With our stuff, if they're applying, we're like, hey, have you made a mod? Show us something. Like, you can make stuff. You look at the App Store now and other games or Steam. There's so many great ways to download something and just make anything. You will learn more and get more out of it by making something and putting it in front of people's eyes and having them enjoy it, have them give you feedback. There's a lot of good schools now, but at the end of the day, it's what you make on your own and enjoying it and really wanting to get better at it.
Are there certain stumbling blocks that you think young or beginning creators hit and then have trouble getting past? And if there are, I see them. I mean, for example, you believe that you can code something, and all of a sudden it's much too hard. You failed. You thought that a demo that you were making was going to turn out really great, and it didn't, and then you get discouraged.
I think that happens every day right now to you and I, right? So
yes.
What you just said happens in professional game developers as well. So I would give the same advice, which is my three main things. Define the experience. Like, what do you really want to have them experience? And try something simple at first. Don't design this big thing and then make some blueprint that's never going to be the case. So think of a vibe and make the simplest version of that you can. And then see where it takes you. That's a good way to attack a thing. There's a great I was watching an interview, and because I'm friends with him, he works with Harvey Smith, who runs Arcane Austin, a great designer, said something in an interview I was watching of his a little while back. He said, you could take the same budget, time, team, tools, game design, everything the same, and you will end up with a different game every time because of the nature of how things flow, someone's attitude during the day, what they thought of this. And it's a much more fluid process to what comes out of it than I think people realize.
That's great advice, because if you haven't done it before and you expect a certain outcome, knowing that it's okay, that their path is going to be twisted and run into unexpected roadblocks and cliffs, etc. Knowing that and hearing it from somebody like you, I think is inspiring. And I hope listeners out there who are interested in getting into game development take all that to heart and use it.
Yeah, and you know what? There are so many great game developers coming up and you look at the explosion of it. We want to make sure people get that and are encouraged by it and keep making stuff, because they're the ones that are making the games that we're all going to be playing when we're not making them anymore.
Exactly.
So we need them.
We do. Well, Todd, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for the Game Maker's Notebook. For more information on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, our podcasts, and our other initiatives, please visit www.interactive.org.